Anxiety is the theme of 2023, and there are millions of people suffering with anxiety, which of course impacts so many of us from being very young all the way to retirement. And so I thought it would be very helpful to make this video about some of the things I am learning in my psychology degree about the inner workings of anxiety and how we can practically tackle it to help ourselves do better. And so in the first instance, I think it's worth pointing out that we have anxiety for a good reason. It helps us to pay attention, and it kind of signals to us that we need to slow down and we could be in danger. And so it is evolutionarily a good thing, but of course we can have too much of it, and pretty much like anything else, when we're out of balance and we have too much anxiety, then that's not such a good thing. And so anxiety affects us, of course, physically, so everything from sweaty palms or very increased breathing rates, or tightness in our chests, or shortness of breath, or feeling even stiff, can have to do with the fact that we are anxious. But it also affects us emotionally, because when we are really nervous, we are somewhat disconnected. We can be numb to our emotions, or we can be incredibly irritable. So, for example, I know when I'm anxious because often I recognize that I'm actually quite angry or frustrated, and so I know that there's something in my environment that is making me anxious. And of course, it also affects us in terms of our cognition. So the way we start to think about things, the way we ruminate and continuously revisit the things that we're anxious about, steals us from effective thinking into these cycles of looking and turning things over and even becoming rather confused. So these things affect us in all three ways, but I would say that what I see with my clients in my practice is that it also affects our spirit. For some of us, it dampens our spirit, it really brings us down, and that makes sense because in research we know that depression and anxiety often go together. But what it means behaviorally is that when it comes to what we do with that, we can have all sorts of responses. We can sort of go into fight mode or flight mode, but we can also freeze. Anxiety can literally arrest us and sort of close our life down because we are incredibly anxious of things. And that means we can get defensive, we can get incredibly overprotective, or we can withdraw. And each of these ways of behaving, of course, will make our life smaller. And so it is useful to think about this year as this theme about what we each can do to help ourselves handle anxiety in a more healthy way, and how we can also help our friends, our loved ones, people we work with to do that a lot better. So psychologists think of worry and anxiety as a ill-made coping response to problem solving. And what I find fascinating about this in terms of my model of an integrated heart, mind, body and spirit is that if we are worrying, we are actually disconnected inside. It means that our brain is working really hard, ruminating, thinking and worrying, but we are actually like almost cutting ourselves off at the neck from the true emotion of, let's say, fear or discomfort or the sweaty palms. And so we're basically kind of coming into pieces. So that is probably why, in a way, it's not a useful way to do things. So I wanted to give you some tips that I've been learning about that I think work for me, and also I have seen work with my clients. And I'd like to start that off by posing 3 questions that I'd like to ask you if you particularly suffer from anxiety or too much worry. The first question is, how much effort do you put into the worrying side of things? So, if you think about your average day, how much of your precious time is actually spent worrying about stuff or feeling anxious? The second one is, when you think about the impact that worry or anxiety has on you, I'd like you to think about, what is that impact actually? How does worrying and feeling anxious impact you? Does it make you better, stronger, or does it actually make you feel bad about yourself? And question 3, does the effort of worrying about things or being anxious do anything to actually make you safer or to change your circumstances? And if the answer to that question is no, then I'd like to give you 3 practical tips that I think could be a better alternative to, let's say, worrying about whether someone will call you back, or whether someone's looked at your proposal, or any of the different things that we, of course, as human beings will worry about. The first of them is to simply do something else. So rather than worry, go do something. Cook yourself a meal, take yourself out for a walk, do anything but sit there and allow your brain to ruminate. Read something, watch a film. Even if it's a displacement activity, it is better than sitting there and rehearsing your brain into these loops of worry. The second one is tap into the help of other people. So if your worry is really serious, for example, I had a worry a few years ago about my health, and no amount of worry could take it away, but actually going and speaking to people with a similar condition gave me some real ideas and evidence and ways in which I could manage my illness, and that was far, far, far better. And the third one is really to reappraise your worry. So really the sorts of questions you might want to ask yourself is, is this worry really important? What's the worst case scenario? So for example, I worry that someone won't call me back. Will I survive? Will I die if they don't call me back? I know that sometimes when our hearts get involved, it can feel like a lot is on the line. And these things can drive anxiety. I've seen that especially to be true in young people, but some of these things, they matter because they touch us, at any age. But sometimes we can really just play the devil's advocate for a moment and say, what can happen to me? So I hope these tips really do help you. And if you have any useful tips on how you've dealt with anxiety or things that have helped you, please drop them below, because I think those will be really useful for all of us. And let's have a great 2023 and beyond.